This is The Round So Far, brought to you by AAMI. I'm Josh Gabelich. This is Kate McCarthy. And Kate, clearly the big story was at the MCG today, where Carlton were so disappointing. Just 64 days after they smashed North Melbourne by 82 points on Good Friday, it was the Kangaroos that turned up the pressure on Michael Voss to leave Carlton's season on life support, Kate.
Yeah, well, there was a lot of emotion, as you can see from these clips. Fans distressed, distraught, angry. Voss himself was very targeted and potent in his three-quarter time address with the midfielders, and dejected scenes as they left the MCG. But it was a very disappointing performance from the Blues, and the scoreline actually did them a favour in the end. Just 11 points they went down by. Should have been a bigger margin, though, with the way that North Melbourne finished the game. But you'd think, with all of the chat around Graham Wright being someone that comes in and shakes up football clubs and isn't afraid to make big decisions, you think that that only puts more pressure on those big decisions that Graham Wright has to make. And I think that the person that most people are looking at now is Michael Voss, and is he the person to continue to take the Carlton Football Club forward? I think when you look at his record, their worst finish under Michael Voss in his first season was 9th with 11 wins. They're currently sitting at just 6 wins, and there is a long way to go if they are to make up the ground on that, Josh.
Well, it's remarkable to think, Kate, that exactly on this day 12 months ago, they were second on the ladder. Since then, they've lost 15 of their past 23 games. And as you touched on, Graham Wright is an agent of change. He's getting his feet under the desk right now as a CEO. He's about to take over from Brian Cook full-time. So a massive watch on what happens heading into the pre-season, because could we see another change where there's been so many coaching changes at Princes Park? Now, let's talk about North Melbourne, because I think they produced one of the best performances we've seen yet under Alistair Clarkson. It was such a stunning first three quarters, especially those middle two quarters. They kicked 8 unanswered goals at one stage. They kicked 12 goals to 3 in the middle two quarters, but it was the contest that set them up. Yeah,
they were way too strong in the contest for the Blues when the game was on the line. 6 goals to zip in the second term alone. 4 of those were from stoppage. It was LDU, it was Simpkin. They were 2 of the best out there, and Simpkin's ability to apply pressure in and around the contest. You look at his numbers and they don't jump off the page, but his pressure acts, his ability to just make sure that when he was around the footy, whoever had the ball was under a whole lot of pressure. With Simpkin, seeing him there on George Hewitt, making sure he really earned that and felt it. But it was something that I think will kind of be taken away from, with the big story being Carlton. But for the first 3 quarters of that game, North were phenomenal, and you'd hope that people that came after Alistair Clarkson and questioned whether he was the man for the job, you'd hope that the last month and a bit of what they've performed and what they've dished out has supported his appointment and would give North fans that hope that they've probably been looking for the past few seasons.
Now, you mentioned the captain, you mentioned LDU, you didn't mention someone who is growing in terms of a club. Now, Toby Pink is such an interesting name. He's stacking up the scalps, and he claimed another one today in the form of a 2-time Coleman medalist, Kate.
He certainly did, and it is the Pink Pony Club that he is now owning, and there's another member that's been added to it, Gabo.
Goalless.
It's Charlie Curnow. Not only was he goalless, he actually didn't take a mark for the entire match, so he did a fantastic job, and he's becoming a bit of a cult hero. I love the way he goes about his business. His other scalps to go with it, obviously Lynch, Tracy, Allen, and now Curnow to join the Pink Pony Club.
The Pink Pony Club. I love it. Now, if you look at Carlton's year to date, I mean, they've had so many winnable opportunities against bottom 3 opposition. This was another opportunity for them today to win. They didn't get it done. Let's have a look. Look at these fixtures against sides that have finished in the bottom 3. West Coast, Richmond, North Melbourne. They've had 5 of them. They haven't been able to really convert them into enough wins. Look at the gap they've had on the opposition. It's quite remarkable. They've got a 5-day break now into Port Adelaide. Then they've got Collingwood at the MCG and Brisbane at Marvel Stadium. It's going to be a long way back from here.
It certainly is. And as we see there, arguably the easier fixture of most teams in the competition. Obviously, West Coast, Richmond and North in positions 16, 17 and 18. And for them to still be so far off the pace with that, when you go back to what you said this day last year, they were sitting in second. It's a pretty damning contrast, really, the last 12 months for the Carlton Football Club.
At Marvel Stadium, Collingwood won a 6th straight game. They're now 6 premiership points clear on top of the ladder. They come off the bye. And it was a 34-point win in the end, but it didn't feel like that. It took a long time to break St Kilda. Ross Lyon got a great response after that really disappointing loss to the Western Bulldogs last Thursday night. So much focus in the build-up on the tagging role. Craig McRae questioned the value of using Marcus Windhager. Ross Lyon didn't balk. He sent Marcus Windhager straight to Nick Dacos. He followed him around for 120 minutes. But in the end, it was the Brownlow medal contender that proved that he can stand up with a tag, and he's your Saturday King, Kate.
He is my Saturday King, and he sort of, the way he was able to work through the tag, I thought Windhager and St Kilda on the whole did a fantastic job in this game. I thought they identified the player that they tried to take out of the game. I think you're a bit of a fool if you're an opposition coach and you don't try and do something to disrupt Nick Dacos, but he stood up. He had the 30 disposals, 5 clearances, 14 contested possessions, 9 score involvements, and this, one of the more important goals in the game. It just felt like the goal that broke St Kilda's hope, pushed it out to a 16-point lead, but they'd had the momentum. They just weren't able to capitalise, and then that goal from Nick Dacos and the celebration, obviously, a bit to go on with because of the job that Windhager had been doing. There was a fair bit of niggle, a fair bit of spite in it as well. But Nick Dacos, he did stand tall, and that is why he is the Saturday King.
Now, it wasn't the only fascinating one-on-one duel upstairs at Marvel Stadium. We saw two of the best ruckmen in the AFL go head-to-head, Darcy Cameron and Rowan Marshall. Both had great moments. How did you score this battle?
Yeah, look, I think it was fairly even. I think the only thing that probably put Cameron slightly ahead of Rowan Marshall was his ability to hit the scoreboard. He did kick the 2 goals to go with his numbers, but they were on par, really. He had a few misses, Cameron, that could have made his night bigger than it was, but I thought it was a very competitive ruck battle, and I think it showed that, yes, there's a lot of talk around TDK and getting him across to the Saints, but I think it showed how valuable Rowan Marshall is at the Saints as a ruck, and he competed with Darcy Cameron, who's been one of the better rucks and a really important ruck to the Collingwood's defensive system as well. So I think he just reminded Saints fans, or the Saints, I think the Saints fans love Rowan Marshall, but the Saints players and the club externally, that he is still a very important player when it comes to them, and just showed again how valuable Darcy Cameron is to the Collingwood Magpies.
Now, there was some drama right before the very first bounce when Matheus Filippo failed to get through the second on-ground warm-up. He got through the first. Now, he missed last week with a plantaris muscle issue. He trained fully all week. Got through the first warm-up, ran through the banner, didn't get through the second warm-up, had a sharp pain in his calf. And with just a couple of minutes to go before the first bounce, they pulled him out of that game. So that was the 2022 Pick 10 coming out. We saw last year's Pick 10 in Alex Taru make his AFL debut. What did you make of the Flying Viking?
Well, it's probably been one of the most anticipated debuts for the St Kilda Footy Club, and I think he did nothing but show why he has been highly anticipated. Obviously, the key position player down back. You look at his numbers, he had the 8 disposals, 5 marks, a couple of tackles to go with it, but I think you look at that and tick it off as a very successful debut. He's had to bide his time. Obviously, he'd had some issues with his back in the pre-season and then the VFL suspension to go with it. So he's worked back through a fair bit of adversity to get his debut, and I was very impressed with him, and I think most Saints fans would be nothing but hopeful for what he can offer the club.
Now, Matheus Filippo wasn't the only injury concern at Marvel Stadium on Saturday night. Bo McCreary came off at quarter time. He was subbed out with hamstring awareness. So I expect him to be scanned tomorrow. So a slight issue of concern there when it comes to that star Collingwood Premiership player. Let's talk about another Collingwood Premiership player from the past, because AAMI Classic Clangers is back in 2025. And back in 2007, Dale Thomas kicked this goal against St Kilda, which looked like goal of the year, or so he thought.
Fisher thought I was going to continue to go that way, but I was able just to shimmy, plant my feet and go back towards goal. And then there was one more person to get past. That was Nick Del Sando, so I gave him a little bit of the candy. He bought it all. And then from there, it was all about the finish.
He works it brilliantly. Absolutely amazing goal. The boat with the winner.
So the whistle goes, and we're trying to figure out what had happened.
It was out of bounds. Oh my God. It was out of bounds. We've all been mesmerised by what we've been watching.
To check out the full clip, go to the AFL social media channels to see that classic Daisy moment. Now, Kate, Sydney flew to Adelaide on Friday and they ended a 5-game losing streak against Port Adelaide at the Adelaide Oval. And for the first time in 2025, Errol Gordon was out there in the red and white, finally over that fractured ankle and broken fibula. Tom Papley was also back for the first time in months coming off that heel injury. Finally, Dean Cox has some crucial puzzle pieces out there.
Yeah, he does, and this is, I think, nothing but positive, as you'd think, for the Sydney Swans. Goulden got through, had the 18 disposals, 5 score involvements, and Papley himself 16 with 6 score involvements as well. And they got through the game. They played a very good game as a team. And I think the thing that needs to be noted is what this opens up then. It allowed Heaney to really show why he is so important to this Sydney Swans team, because he didn't have to do everything. He didn't have to cover the small forward role that was missing with Papley. He didn't have to go through the midfield, play inside and outside, and Chad Warner as well was a beneficiary of those two coming back. So Heaney, 28 touches, 6 score involvements, 5 clearances and 2 goals. And I just think the back half of the season is going to be really important for the Sydney Swans, not for this year, but for what they can build for next year, because there's been a lot of chat around Dean Cox and their injury list. They've got most of their troops back now. What can they start to put together to get some momentum so we see how Dean Cox wants to coach the Sydney Swans?
Joel Amati was the other one that came back in, but he had a wayward day in front of goal. 0-6 and 2 misses. They let him know about it post-game, the Sydney boys. What about Port Adelaide? Because they came off a great fortnight. They went to Canberra a fortnight ago, got the job done against GWS at Manuka Oval. Then last Sunday, they beat Melbourne. All of a sudden, it looked like they had a bit of a pulse, but they were so disappointing today. We know the narrative around Ken Hinkley and the succession plan at Alberton with Josh Carr. This is the road home. Is it season over at 6 and 8? Can you see them recovering to play finals? This is a team that reached a prelim last year, Kate.
Well, having a look at the run to come and even just the ladder standings and the rest of the fixture, having a play around with it, they'd almost have to win every single one of these games to still be a finals contender. And with the peaks and troughs that we've seen in their form that you've just outlined for the last couple of weeks, but if you go all the way back to round 1, the season has just looked so up and down. I don't see that being the case. And the question that I have is, Ken Hinkley said a few weeks ago, when the season's done, that's when I'm going to step aside. Is the season done? I think it pretty much is, if you're looking at this.
It's a long way home from there, Kate. How about Friday night at GMHBA Stadium? Brisbane headed down to Cardinia Park and ended a 13-game losing streak, which dated back to 2003. They spoiled Patrick Dangerfield's 350th celebration. They came to Victoria early, and under Chris Fagan, they executed a clear plan.
They did, and I just want to have a look at the game plan that was in place from early on. This is in the first quarter, and Geelong, they love using the ball. They have some great ball users down there, especially out of their back half. So just have a look how well set up they are to cover the corridor here, the Brisbane Lions, and force them long each time. And you can see the Geelong players looking inboard, wanting to take that kick. It's not on. They're being forced long down the line. And each time Brisbane were able to get the turnover, then make the ground really, really big and make it hard for Geelong to defend on turnover. This one here, they're sick of going long down the line. So Brian Myers tried to invent something. Wilmot comes forward, pressures, kicks a goal. So I just thought it was the perfectly executed game plan. There's times where Chris Fagan doesn't get the applause as a technical and tactical coach. I think the technical and tactical aspect from Chris Fagan and his coaching group was on point in that game. They were able to get Geelong's numbers down from 27 points that they conceded from turnover, Brisbane Lions, which is the second lowest that the Geelong Cats have scored this season from turnover. And on the other hand, they conceded 66 points, the third most that they've conceded all year, the Cats. So a well-executed game plan, which really went a long way to them winning that game.
Brisbane have now won 4 of their past 5 games against Geelong, including at 3 different venues. Most memorably was that prelim last year, of course, at the MCG. We expect these two to go deep into September. We expect them to face each other at some stage during that final series. Do they have an edge on them at the moment, given that recent record?
I think it's funny because going into this game, the talk was around the 2003 being the last time that the Lions won at Cardinia Park. But if you do look at that window of history, the Lions have actually recently had the wood over them and have ended Geelong's seasons a couple of times in recent history. So I think obviously Chris Scott is a fantastic coach. He'll have things that he wants to change out of that game. The Cats didn't play to their best, but you got to give the Lions a tick for backs against the wall. People were starting to question whether they did have what they sort of presented last year still in them, and I think that game really showed that on any given day they are still a pretty formidable force in the competition.
Logan Morris is rising with a bullet. 5 more goals on Friday night against Geelong. Now up to 30 in 2025. He's equal 6th in the Coleman medal right now. Now the 2023 draft is absolutely stacked full of key position stars of the future. We've got so many goal kickers on this list. You look at some of these names. Nate Caddy, there's been a lot spoken about him. Jed Walter looks like a star of the future. There's a key defender on this list who's not there in Connor O'Sullivan, who was taken at pick 11 and looks magnificent. But to think that Logan Morris was taken at pick 31, he's having as big an impact as anyone in this draft class.
Yeah, and I think the reason why he's potentially flown under the radar a little bit is because of his consistency. So apart from the last couple of weeks where he's gone back-to-back with 5+ hauls, he's just sort of gone at a couple of goals a game and done his job in the forward line. And I think at times a key position player, it's very hard to come in and do your job because it's a hard job to do. And he's quickly taken off that mantle from Eric Hipwood as the key target inside forward 50 for the Brisbane Lions. And that back-to-back haul of 5 goals he's the youngest player to actually do that since our man here at AFL, Matty Lloyd, in 1997. So I think that's a huge sort of thing for him to tick off. There was a lot of talk last week about Aaron Cadman and how good he is. He was obviously the number 1 pick. Logan Morris slipped to 31, so a lot less pressure on him. But I think he is doing absolutely everything that he can to put his hand up as the next developing key forward in the competition. One
of the great recent picks in recent times. Kate, staggering to think he was pick 31. Let's go back to Thursday night in the West, where Fremantle won a 5th straight game. First time they've done this under Justin Longmuir. Shea Bolton's been a key reason why they've got their season going again. He's clearly been one of the recruits of the year, and he was involved in a little bit of everything at Optus Stadium.
He sure was, and I think there was a lot going on off the ball at times in this game. A lot of pointing at the scoreboard from Bolton. And
any issue with this?
No, I think for me, with this particular player in Bolton, I think he actually plays his best footy when he's the antagonist. He's really making it about getting inside the opponent's head. He's up and about. His footy is up and about when he's doing things like this. And I know that might rub some supporters the wrong way, but it's when he does play his best footy. We have a lot of players in the game. You think of sort of Nick Watson, Jack Ginnivan, just to name a couple. When they're up and about and they're in the contest, they are doing things like that, and that's when you know they're on. So I think they've found out in the last few weeks how they can best use Shea Bolton, and I think they're starting to reap the benefits of getting him over to the Fremantle Football Club.
Now, it wasn't that long ago that Fremantle were 4-5. There was a lot of pressure on Justin Longmuir. All of a sudden, they're 9-5. They're just outside the top 4 on percentage. What's changed over the last 5 games?
Well, if we have a look, it's a largely down to the midfield numbers. So contested possession clearance, stoppage score differential is the big one, 14th to 2nd, and obviously the win-loss record. They've got 5 on the trot now. But for me, they've become more of a front half team. We know how much that's talked about. If they're able to win these stats like clearance and stoppage score differential, they're keeping the ball in their front half and they're being more attacking. We all know what happened in the preseason game where it was labelled as vanilla by their own coach, their game plan. And it sort of looked like early in the season that's how it was going to be for the Fremantle Dockers. And myself and Nat Edwards labelled them as pretenders a few weeks ago on the back of that 4-5. Purely because what we expected and what we were seeing was nowhere near, or they weren't matching up. And I think what we've seen the last 5 weeks is exactly what I expected to see from the Fremantle Dockers this season. And I don't think there's any question as to whether or not they can go deep in September. If they keep dishing out the form that they've been dishing out the last 5 weeks, there shouldn't be much to stop them from playing finals this year.
Almost the form team in the game right now. 2 games left in round 15. It starts tomorrow at NG Stadium with the Expansion Cup. Gold Coast travel to Sydney to face GWS. And the final game of the round is the Western Bulldogs hosting Richmond at Marvel Stadium. That's all we've got time for on this edition of The Round so far. Thanks to Amy. Thanks to Kate. We'll see you again next week.